Hello again, everyone. In our previous video, we took a look at named and anonymous PL/SQL blocks. We said those are the two basic ways of creating PL/SQL code that you can run against your database. And we said that named blocks can be either functions or procedures. And we took a look at some functions. Functions are pretty easy to understand. They're always going to return a value. Procedures don't necessarily return a value. You can call them without assigning them to a variable. But you can have parameters that go along with procedures, and we saw that was true of functions also. You have parameters that go along with procedures, and those parameters can be of three types. So let's do parameters. And they can be of three types. You can have in parameters, you can have out parameters, and you can have in out. Right? These are going to be read. These are going to be write. And these are going to be read-write. So a procedure doesn't necessarily have to return a value, but you can specify parameters as being out parameters, which will return the value back to whatever called this particular procedure. In-outs are exactly, what they sound like also. They're parameters where you can pass the value in, you can manipulate the value, and then return it back to whatever called this particular procedure. So even though procedures don't specifically return a value the way functions do, you have that capability to do that. Procedures don't necessarily have to take parameters. They can take parameters. They may not take parameters. So let's hop in and take a look at what it takes to actually create a parameter inside your, to create a procedure inside your database. So I'm going to hop into SQL Developer here. And it's always good to take a look at existing procedures that are out there so you can get a feel for the type of code and the things that you can do inside of a procedure. We're going to go into all the different details of PL/SQL and all of the different if then else statements, how to update information inside your database, how to do transactions, all that sort of stuff. This is just a really high level overview of what a procedure is and the types of things that you can do inside of a procedure. So if we go to the HR schema, and if you install 11G R2 database and you choose the sample schemas while you're doing the install, you get a whole bunch of these schemas that give you an indication of all the different things that you can do inside of an Oracle database. And there's an HR schema, and there's a couple of procedures that go along with the HR schema. One is called Add Job History, and one is called Secure DML. So if I double click on Add Job History here, brings it up for me. Oh, I already had it up there. Darn it. Got all of these windows open. Too many tabs. That's what's slowing down my machine. So if I take a look at the Add Job History procedure, you can see that it's taking in 5 parameters: PM ID, P start date, P end date, P job ID, P department ID. And then what does it do with all of that information that gets passed? Well, it doesn't do anything fancy, right? It just inserts into the job history table. So this procedure is really just doing an insert statement. And it's just taking in those parameters. And you can see the naming convention of the parameters. You don't have to call parameters this way, but it's a common way of giving your parameter name so you can reference it real easily, P underscore before the actual variable name. So P underscore emp ID start date, these are all going to be input parameters to this particular procedure. And then the procedure just takes those values, and you can see it inserts into the job history table. We specify the column names: employee ID, start date, end date, job ID, department ID. The values are going to be what we actually pass into this procedure. If we take a look at this other procedure, this one's called Secure DML. Here's another example of one. And you can see there are no parameters that are associated with it. So this procedure doesn't take in any parameters, doesn't return any kind of values as in-out parameters or anything like that. All it does is it's a procedure that you can call. And what does it do? It checks the current system date. And if the current system date is between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., or if it's not between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., or if the actual day itself is Saturday or Sunday, then it raises an application error that says you can only make changes during normal office hours. So this is a real simple way of doing a check to say somebody's on our system, they're updating information. Are they doing it during normal business hours, or are they outside of business hours? So you can call the secure DML statement from anywhere inside your code to say, just to do a double check to say, hey, somebody's trying to do something in my database. They have privileges to do it, but maybe it's not the right time. Maybe they shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we need to flag something and say, hey, why is this person doing something on a Saturday, or they're doing it outside of normal business hours? Maybe they're hacking into my database and they're trying to do stuff. So here's a real simple procedure, and all it does is, like I said, it checks the time and the day, and if it falls outside of acceptable hours, it raises this application error. So these are two examples of procedures, one of which takes in a bunch of parameters, one of which doesn't have any parameters whatsoever, to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do inside of a procedure inside your database. If you want to create a procedure, Oracle will create the kind of framework, the outline for you automatically using its wizards. So if I want to create a new procedure, I just right click on whatever I want to do and I say, okay, I want to create this new procedure. Call it XYZ. And you can see I have this ability to go in here and specify the parameters that are going to be associated excuse me, with this particular procedure. So if I click on plus, I can have all of these different parameters in there, give them different names, specify the different types that I'm going to pass in. What mode is it going to be? Are they ins? Are they outs? Are they in-outs? I can also define define a default value that goes along with the parameters. This can be really helpful for if, as part of the processing, you may come across reading information out of a database, and something that you read has a blank value or a null value in it or something like that. So if my business, let's say it's a local business, I only have customers that are local here in Colorado. I might have a procedure that updates information about my customers on a regular basis, and I might have a parameter that says, okay, if the state is a null or a blank, or for whatever reason when I was entering that information into my database for my customers, I didn't put a state in for whatever reason, I can have a default value of CO for Colorado. And then when it comes time for me to update the information inside my database, it takes the default value and puts a CO in there, assuming that there was the value that I read out of the database was a null value or a blank field or whatever. So once I specify all this information, I can take a look at the DDL, and it kind of creates a skeleton piece of code for me. This actually doesn't do anything, and it doesn't actually even create the procedure inside my database. What it does is it's going to show me what it's going to create inside my editor window. So when I click on OK, that procedure XYZ isn't really created inside my database yet. It just kind of brings it up as part of my code window. That gives me the ability to go in there and say, okay, now I have to replace everything between the begin and the end with whatever I want this procedure to do. And the procedure, like I said, can do just about anything inside the database. One of the really nice features of PL SQL is that it is incredibly efficient. So when you're modeling your business processes, if you want to do it inside your database, inside of PL SQL code, it's going to be hard to beat that in terms of efficiency and speed. The PL SQL engine is incredibly fast. It's an incredible way of optimizing the code that goes inside your database. Now, more and more architecture is moving to what they call an N-tier architecture, where you take a lot of the business logic out of the database and you put it in the mid-tier. And there's certain advantages to doing that also. So I might have a procedure that does some validation checks on my customer, or their credit rating or anything like that. If I take that information out of the database and I put it kind of in the mid-tier where my middleware is running, I can save a trip to the database. I can offload some of the work that my database would be doing on a regular basis. But in terms of keeping your business logic inside your database, it's going to make the database work a little harder when it has to do its daily processing. But in terms of efficiency, it's really tough to beat as efficient as the PL SQL engine is ingrained with the Oracle database. So in the previous video, we took a look at anonymous blocks and named blocks inside your Oracle database, and we also took a look at functions. And we said the main thing that makes a function that it's always going to return a value. For procedures, that's not necessarily the case. We might have an in-out variable where we modify the variable inside of the procedure, and then we return it back to the calling program, or whatever's calling this particular procedure, XYZ in this example. But it's not mandatory. You don't have to do that. So procedures give you a lot of flexibility in terms of putting business logic inside your Oracle database, and it's also a very efficient way of executing complex code against the Oracle database. In next couple of videos, we're going to take a look at some of the syntax that makes up the PL SQL language, and we're going to look at some of the really interesting things that allows you to do some complex data manipulation inside your database from PL SQL without having to kind of reinvent the wheel and learn an entirely new language. If you know SQL already, you should pretty much understand most of the things that go on inside the PL SQL language, since it's pretty close to the SQL standard. You don't have to learn an entirely new skill set to get a lot of functionality out of your Oracle database.